So Rob Weitzman wrote in the Huffington Post, I harbor an old myth that says God is out there somewhere and I've got to pray him down to me. There's a lot in that sentence. There's actually a lot of myths in that sentence, not just one. So let's take a look at it. God is out there somewhere. So this entity, and call it whatever you wish, or energy, God, goddess, spirit, great spirit, the divine, whatever resonates for you. But this thing that we call the divine or God or spirit is in Rob's myth, which probably a lot of us can relate to, somewhere amorphous, right? We can't quite pin it down. We don't know exactly where it is, but it's pretty certain it's not in us if it feels like somewhere out there, right? So the myth is we don't know where it is, and it's definitely out there. And then there's another myth in his sentence that says, I've got to pray him down to me. So I've got to make all this effort to, so now it's kind of indicating maybe he's up somewhere, right? Or out and up somewhere. And now we've got to do all this efforting. There's no way we can get close if we don't pray him down to us. And then there's the myth, of course, in there that God's a he. So, I mean, he, she, it, they, we don't know, right? It's an inclusive term. It's not an exclusive term. But these myths that he brings out are the myths that we have lived with for centuries. They're the ones that have been taught by the church for so long. I wonder how many sermons, how many classes, how many times the scriptures have been interpreted or written or taught in such a way that for us sounds like mythology. And for Rob, apparently. So it also is true that there are images throughout time that have impressed upon us these same ideas. And so I'm just wondering if you've ever seen the image. It is one of the most replicated religious images of all time. I think the Lord's Supper might be up there too somewhere. And it's beautiful. I mean, if you've ever had the opportunity to actually stand at the Sistine Chapel in the Vatican and look up at the ceiling, there are collective oohs and ahs going on. I heard Danae just say she was there in person. And even if you haven't been in there in person, almost every one of you went, oh yeah, I've seen that image before, right? So what that means is there is an image, it's an image that captures, as we know the saying, right? 1,000 words, right? A picture's worth 1,000 words. This is worth 1,000 religious words right here, this image. And it is impressed on our consciousness over and over again because we see it repeatedly. So the painting is beautiful, done by Michelangelo, and it's got a lot in it that is in here. And that has shaped our beliefs both individually and. So it's called the creation of Adam, by the way. And so when we take a look at the creation of Adam, we're told essentially by it, who and where is God? And who are we? And how are we in relationship to God? That's basically the questions that are answered. That's the questions that are answered in our 5 basic principles. Who and what is God? Who are we? And how are we in relationship to this divinity that we talk about? So I'm pointing over here for those of you who are new because we have 5 paintings of the 5 basic principles. Today we're starting this series. It's going to be kind of scattered throughout the summer. But today we're starting the series. And if we look at this painting as a representation of just a snapshot of all these teachings that we're talking about and that Rob is pointing to in his thing about the myth, we go back to Genesis for a moment, and it says that we're created in God's image. But the teachings and the picture show us that no, actually, it looks like God's created in our image because God looks like a human. And then it's really interesting to find out that God and humans are white males. God's just older. Now, it's true that for all the white males, you are God, but so are the rest of us. And so it's about inclusion, right? But the inclusion is missing. And that makes for a lot of population that we already have, right? Even if you're representing the picture, we already have a stretch to make, at least to get to principle number 2, to say, I am divine. That's already kind of a hurdle. And then if you don't see yourself represented, it kind of creates yet another hurdle. So we've got all this stuff that's sort of wrapped into what we have been living with for so long. And so what's important when we look at this principle is to say, if we say, yeah, God is good and all loving and all present and everywhere, and then when we say, but yeah, I don't always feel it. Well, how come we don't always feel it? What is it? We've got to mind the gap. I know, that's what they say on BART, isn't it, when you get off the train in England? Mind the gap, yeah. So let's take a look a little closer up to the picture. Did you notice that the hands don't touch? Now this is the greatest lie of all, that humans and the divine are separate, that there will always be a gap, that we just can't quite bridge that gap. This is, if you will, the greatest sin that we can carry, because sin means mistake. It's the greatest mistaken belief that has been taught through the centuries, that there is this transcendent being, and we will just never quite get there because there's a gap, or we have to work really hard to get there. Now, Adam is not making a whole lot of effort here. Let's look at the big picture again. You see, God's like stretching over the angels, like, I'm doing everything I can. And Adam's like, really chill, like kind of nonchalant almost. It's as if, God created the heavens and the earth and the animals and the plants and the humans, and Adam went, meh. Principle today, we would say, Adam, can't you at least lift your finger? Look at what God has done here. If you just lifted your finger, we'd bridge that gap, right? But that's not what we're talking about here. Today, we're talking about principle number 1. And principle number 1, it's really important for us to bridge the myth, to recognize that there is a myth that we live with, that we've been taught, and that's what makes it hard. That's it. Because the presence is here. It's the permeating presence of the divine. It's in our minds. It's in our hearts. It's in our bodies. It's in the cells of our being. It surrounds us. It's in everything and everyone around us. All we have to do is pay attention, right? And there it is. We experience it. We feel it. We know it is here for us. But because of the myths that we live with, we have greater bridges, greater gaps to pay attention to. And so all we have to do is have it in our awareness, and then we can go, oh, right, that's not something I believe anymore. But a lot of times we don't know, really. We think we've put a new belief over a whole set of impressions that have been made over time. And so we don't really know that this surface belief isn't really penetrating because there's a lot of foundational layers there. And so but it's not like we have to, drill through it or anything. I don't want to give you the impression that this is going to be this huge Herculean effort, because it's not. It's just simply like, oh, wow, I didn't know I was still holding all that. I didn't know I was still carrying that around with me all the time. Instead, I could just begin to affirm the truth that I know to be true and to practice coming into this presence, the feeling, the knowing that I am held, that it is available to me to all of us. Maybe after all, Adam knew all this. And maybe that's why he was so relaxed. It's like, I don't have to make a big effort here. Spirit is in me, is around me, fills me. I kind of like Adam's posture now that I think about it, because it's got that kind of receptivity and openness. It's not full of effort and striving. Wouldn't it be nice if we could just recognize that we don't have to work so hard? We don't have to strive so much. We can just rest in the presence because we can, because it's here for us. It's true. So in that gap is a lot of pain over the many years. It's a lot of lost potential. And so there might even be grief when we recognize how we've been living from a kind of paradigm that says, I can't reach that place. It's just always a little bit out of my grasp. But if instead we realize that, feel those feelings, allow those feelings to happen, and then allow ourselves to open, a lot of that old stuff can fall away. Sometimes we experience the divine presence, of course, in more profound moments of our lives when we have a big challenge going on, for example, or we're in a moment of prayer, or we come into a place where we just say, I can't do this anymore, or I don't know what to do in this situation, or I feel alone, or I'm scared. Anybody ever been to any of those places? And have you in those moments also felt that presence? Sometimes yes, maybe, sometimes no. Maybe you're still in one of those places and you're longing for that opening, that space to come, that feeling and that knowing to happen for you. So yesterday, I don't know if you know Susan Angelos, besides being our facilitator up here, she creates our slides and our Center Point Weekly, and so we're often in conversation by email on Saturdays, and she responded to what I sent her to put in the newsletter and said, wow, I really had just experienced what you just wrote up about the talk tomorrow. And I said, oh, would you like to share? And she said, I would love to share. So I'm going to invite Susan up to share a little bit of her journey with this principle in recent times.
Again. So in March of last year, something showed up on my mammogram and a biopsy confirmed the diagnosis. In May and again in June, I had 2 surgeries to remove the lump, followed by radiation. Now, getting a cancer diagnosis is always a gut punch. On this journey, I did a lot of praying and meditating. And in prayer, I came to know, really know, that this was not the end of my story. I heard during meditation that I would be sent angels of healing, and some of those angels are here in this room, and thank you. You know who you are. There were times when I was frustrated and unsteady, but a timely daily word told me to let go and let God, and I did. I found peace, and my angels, both earthly and otherwise, supported me through the entire process. 6 months later, tests showed the cancer was gone, and hooray! Now, almost exactly a year after the first surgery, this past May, a larger and more aggressive cancer was found on the other side. And I have feelings about that. Okay? But my angels and my God gave me strength and confidence. I had successful surgery 2 weeks ago. But I want to tell you something about what happened on July 11th. I was in Kaiser, Walnut Creek, being wheeled down a 47,000-mile-long corridor on a gurney. Because that's not intimidating or anything. The nurse who was with me was telling me snarky stories about the doctors that worked there, trying to make me laugh, when all of a sudden I was overcome by love and prayer. I felt it so strongly. I looked up, it was noon, which is when the prayer circle met that day. And of course, my angels knew what was happening. So I started to cry. And this poor nurse was terrified, thought I was in pain or worried or something, and was so relieved when I told him why that he prayed with me right there in the corridors of Kaiser and Walnut Creek. Now, this might give you the impression that I am deeply, extraordinarily spiritual, or perhaps unrelentingly positive, and some of you know me better than that. There are days when I question, there are days when I am pissed off, there are days when I falter. But I feel the presence of God every day, even when I can't make myself be grateful that day. My angels, earthly and otherwise, are still with me. And I feel confident down to the core of my being that my path is unfolding as it should, and I still feel that this is not the end of my story. Now, I was going to conclude these remarks with my usual "you are enough" stuff that I do, but the universe had other plans. So today's daily word. Although my experience can be seen as a gift, bringing new insight or deeper understanding, it may be hard to appreciate it at first. And the affirmation is, I release and move forward with a grateful heart.
Thank you so much, Susan. I love Susan's story for so many reasons. One, because, I know I and many of us love you, Susan, and we're glad you're okay. But also because your story shows us how to open ourselves, how to be vulnerable, be willing to ask for help, to allow it in, to receive, and to trust. And all of that happened in your story, as well as that palpable experience of the presence. So Elijah, Elijah is that prophet, you might remember. He has, of course, a long story, but there is a point in Elijah's story where he is also facing profound challenge. And that awe and majesty that is also a way into the divine presence, that feeling and experience. Is it not? Times in nature or art, or times when you're creating or you're witnessing creation or some amazing feat. Those moments, like watching an Olympic athlete. Those moments that we just go, wow, that is incredible. And you can feel that sense of awe. So Elijah has both the sense of challenge in the presence and also, but first he has to get to that point. So he has enemies, and he's running from his enemies. He's fleeing for his life, actually. He gets out into the wilderness, and he actually says to God, just take my life. I don't want to go on. I don't know how to do this. And an angel comes along, another angel comes along, and gives him food and water and says, carry on your journey. So for about 40 days, as the story always goes, 40 is what it means metaphysically, however long it takes, right? That's why we hear 40 so much in the Bible. It's just You're out there in the wilderness for as long as it takes. But so he comes to a cave at Mount Horeb. And he's in the cave for a bit, and then suddenly he hears the voice of God. Elijah, what are you doing here? And Elijah's like, well, and then he tells his story, because that's what we do, right? He tells his story. It's still, after 40 days, he's telling the same kind of frenetic story, maybe with not the same frenetic details, but about how his enemies are after him and all the things that have happened and so on. And God says, come into my presence. I'm going to come closer. So Elijah's still he's not quite at the mouth of the cave, but he's sort of walking toward it. And where he stops, he sees that there's this big earthquake on the mountain. And then there's a big fire. And then there's an intense wind. But through all of these major, what we would call natural disasters, Elijah doesn't really feel the presence. So when does he feel the presence? What does bring him back into the truth of his being and stepping back into his life? The sound of sheer silence. It says suddenly the sound of sheer silence was available. And then Elijah felt it. And then Elijah stepped out. But before he stepped out, it felt so profound that he wraps his face in a scarf, and then he goes out because it's so bright, it's so intense, it's so powerful to come back into the presence when we've been in the gap. And so then Elijah gets clear guidance in the presence. Once he comes back into that that presence, he's no longer wandering around in the wilderness anymore. He's no longer saying, just take my life. Now he knows what to do, how to get back into his life, what to do when he goes back down the mountain. Do you relate to this? Do you ever just want to go, I am done with this? Swoop me up to some kind of heavenly space wherever I came from so I can just be with my God. And yet, here we are, heaven on earth, the presence permeating our being and surrounding us and holding us and encouraging us and bringing us comfort and reassurance and confidence and inspiration and light and love and truth and joy and hope at every turn. All we have to do is open ourselves to it. And the sound of sheer silence may be one of the ways in. So what do you do? How do you get into the presence? What is it, like literally, what happens for you in order to open to that presence, to feel that presence? Do you know? For many of us in this room and how we practice together, we tend to close our outer eyes and drop into our heart or somewhere within our being. And so that's probably the easiest way for us to experience together in this setting. So I just want to invite you for a moment to do that. Close your eyes if you wish, to drop in. And together we just invoke the presence. We know it's there, but we invoke it to come into our consciousness. I want to see you. I want to feel you, sense you, know you, hear you. If you just begin to feel or sense an inkling of that, see if you can lean in a little further, a little deeper. Notice how you perceive it. Do you see something inside? Do you hear something? Do you feel it or sense it? How do you describe this divine presence? Somebody asked you, well, what is it? What would you say? What's your experience? And finally, how do you feel when you're aware of the presence? How do you feel right now if you're aware of the presence? I just invite you to give thanks in whatever way feels right for you. Maybe wiggle some fingers or toes just to bring fuller attention to your body, physical space. You bring some light and attention to the back behind your eyes before you open your eyes. Come back into this space. Does anybody want to share anything? How you would describe this presence that you experienced? Yeah. Calm. Calmness. God is love. Yeah. Thank you. Anybody else want to share? Energy. Richard? Knowing. Don. Sun and sun. S-O-N and S-U-N. Peace. Shrish. Oh, yeah. David? Embraced. Suzanne? Gentle compassion. Annika? Music. Nice. Alexandra? And so that also tells me how you may primarily perceive as hearing words or voice. We all can perceive in all these ways, right? We can hear, we can see, we can feel, we can sense, but often there's one that's a little bit more primary for us. So knowing that is helpful, because when you need a fast answer, you know you can listen and the answer will come. Somebody else had a hand back there. Somebody else raise their hand? Yeah, Allie. Ooh, surprising and untamed. See how different they are? I mean, I think that's why I want you to share, because it's really powerful to see all the different aspects that we can plug into and how all of us collectively are plugging into different aspects. That's really beautiful, isn't it? It makes it even more accessible to us. Maybe you haven't yet experienced the untamed. What was it? Untamed and surprising side. So there's something for me to explore. Yeah. And you see how easy that was. In a couple minutes, in this whole room, there was this sense of the profound awareness of the presence that permeates our beings. And we can take that out into the world. You carry that with you wherever you go. In the store, in the grocery store, in the lines, in traffic, in your work, in your family, on the phone with a relative that just keeps getting under your skin. You can just go, oh, right, we're all in the untamed, surprising joy, love, peaceful space of the one. Let me just breathe into that for a moment. You can't escape. In case you thought you could, Elijah was trying to flee his life, right? And in a sense, flee the presence and hide from it. But we can't. That's the good news, bad news. We cannot escape from the divine presence love, from the love that Spirit holds for each of us and all of us. The psalmist tried and said, where can I go from you, Spirit? Where can I flee from your presence? If I go up to the heavens, you are there. And if I make my bed in the depths, you are there. If I rise on the wings of the dawn, if I settle on the far side of the sea, even there, your hand will guide me and you will hold me fast. So practicing the presence, allowing ourselves to recognize what is already here for us. We just recognize that there might be a gap. There might be a gap in our consciousness, a myth that we're holding that might stand in the way. We don't need to make it a big deal. We just go, oh, yeah, I think that might be in the collective consciousness, but I don't really hold to that anymore because I know all I have to do is breathe, drop into my heart, and there I am again in the presence. So let's affirm this together, and I just really want to encourage us to practice the presence throughout the week. Together, the presence of the divine is here now. I pause, enter the silence, listen, feel, and sense it. And so it is.